Hi, I'm Neil and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you some advice on what to do if you've just inherited a property. If you've just inherited a property then, firstly, congratulations, but I also understand that it may not be under the best of circumstances. You may have been left a property by a loved one or a family member or friend, and that's a tough time, both physically and emotionally with dealing with that. However, I'm just going to focus on the investment side today, and I'm going to show you exactly what I would do and what I advise my clients to do who have inherited a property and they're not sure exactly what they should do with it. So we'll get started. So we're going to use the board behind me now, and I'm going to talk you through your three options for what to do with this property. So the first option is quite a simple one, and that is that you may rent the property out to somebody like a family, or you may rent it on a corporate let, or you may rent it to a young couple or something like that. That would be a very straightforward and simple option. However, there's usually a snag if a property is inherited that it may not be in the best of condition. So you may need to put some money into that property to get it ready to be rented out. So there's a couple of things you need to be aware of. Number one, is the money that you're going to be putting into that property going to be worth the investment? Is the property in a good area? Who's in that area? Are there companies nearby? Is it a family area with good schools? Or is it maybe not such a good area where you may not get the best of tenant? You may not get the sort of tenant that you're looking for. Maybe there's crime in the area, there's maybe some sort of violence or gangs, things like that, which is quite common with a number of properties that do get inherited. So you've really got to do your research first, find out who your tenant market would be in that area, and then weigh up whether or not it would be a good thing to spend that money into the property. You will also need to speak to an accountant to find out what your tax liability would be on that property. The second thing you can do with the property then is you could move into that property yourself. So that's your second option. You've got to ask yourself, would you want to move into that property yourself? Would you want to take it on? Is there a mortgage on the property as well? A lot of properties that do get inherited don't have a mortgage. Maybe it's 1 in 10 or 2 in 10 will have a mortgage on it. If you inherit the property, you're in most cases highly likely to also take on that mortgage liability. So you need to look at that. You need to weigh that up. Maybe you need to speak to a solicitor, or your accountant would probably be the best person to get advice from. Find out what your liability would be on that property. Because if you do have a mortgage on the property and you're going to have to take that mortgage on, you need to see if that's a good decision for you to take that property on. And also comes back to the point I mentioned before, how much will you need to spend on that property in order to get it to a very nice condition so that you could move in and live there. And then point number 3 is usually the option that I advise all of my clients, and that is to actually sell the property. Now, there's a few things you need to be aware of if you do go down this road. Number one, again, is there a mortgage on the property? You need to make sure that you've checked that, spoken to an accountant. And if you are going to sell the property, then that's fine. You would just pay off the mortgage and keep whatever the balance is. Again, you have to factor in, do you want to rent it or do you want to move into the property? How much needs to be spent on it? Now, I take a very different approach. I don't take an emotional approach to investment properties, and I also wouldn't take an emotional approach if you're in this situation right now and thinking about it. So the question you need to ask is, if you were in the market right now to buy a property as an investment, would you buy this property for the market value it is now? That's the question. So let's say that the market value of the property you've inherited is £200,000. Would you spend, let's say £50,000 right now, putting a deposit down at 25% to buy that property as an investment property? Is that a good allocation of your funds? Now, if the answer is no, the answer in most cases is that it's probably best to sell that property. And in almost every case when I sit with my clients, I always advise them to sell the property. Now, there's another thing you need to know about, and I'm just going to add this on over here, and that's inheritance tax. Now, inheritance tax is something that you will have to pay on the property when you inherit it if it's above the threshold. Now, the threshold on these properties is £325,000. So if you inherit a property and it's worth £325,000 or less, you will have a zero liability inheritance tax. But again, this video, by the time you watch it, may not be correct with current legislation and tax law. So again, my advice is always to speak to a qualified accountant to get your accurate, up-to-date advice. But if it is $325,000 or more, and you're thinking of selling the property, just be aware that the inheritance tax right now is extremely high in the UK. It is 40%. So you are going to pay a substantial amount of tax on the property if it is above this amount. If it isn't and it's below this amount, again, speak to your accountant, but you shouldn't have to pay any inheritance tax at all. So here's what I would do then. So let's say you've inherited a property and it's, let's say £300,000, for example. I wouldn't keep all that money locked into that property. I'd do one of two things. If it was in a good area and I knew there was good growth, capital growth in that area, I would probably invest a little bit of money into it, whether that be via a remortgage or via savings that I've got. And then I would remortgage the property once it was done up to a nice standard, and I would invest in some other properties. The other thing that I would do is I would simply sell the property if I know I can get a better return elsewhere, and then I would take that money and I'd buy several other properties. For $300,000, you might be able to get, say, 6 other really good property investments where you would have just had that one property. So that is my advice. And again, I'm sorry if you are in this situation and it was a loved one, but hopefully this advice I've given you just now will help you to make this a positive thing for your future. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this advice helps. Take care.